welcome to this week's episode of the book club reading of Star Wars Aftermath Life Debt. If you'd like to join us from the beginning of the series, go ahead and click here. Basically, we've been going through this book a couple of chapters at a time, discussing the larger themes and events in the book a little bit at a time. You can go back to the beginning of the book there, or if you want to see us from the beginning of the series, this is the second book in a trilogy, you can click on this playlist and it will take you through our journey of book 1. But with that, let's get into today's reading. So today we're discussing the 8th interlude of the book, as well as chapters 31, 32, and 33. I've said this a couple of times before, there's really not that many interludes in the book. We just now hit the 8th one, and we're really close to being done with the book, and there were 16 in the last one. So that's kind of surprising to me, especially because the interludes are some of my favorite parts of this trilogy. So it's been interesting to have less of that, especially considering this book is longer than the first one, but that is alright. The interludes we get are really good, so they are definitely worth the time that we spend on them. This 8th interlude takes place on Hosnian Prime. Hosnian Prime becomes the capital of the New Republic. Currently in this book trilogy, it's on Chandrilla, the homeworld of Mon Mothma, but it eventually becomes Hosnian Prime. Hosnian Prime is one of the planets in the Hosnian system, and the Hosnian system is what gets blown up in The Force Awakens. This interlude is about a Rebel Alliance veteran by the name of Dade. Dade is getting a new leg. This is a very touching story about Dade going through the experience of having his prosthetic robotic limb, turned on, and what it feels like to have this. Of course, he gets an actual, like I said, cybernetic limb. It's not like the prosthesis that we necessarily have here on Earth, so it's kind of a different experience. He can think and move it and that sort of thing. Dade, however, is not thrilled with getting the leg. He's definitely suffering from a lot of the after effects of being in war, some different kind of PTSD type things. He can't sleep well. His doctor's asking him about the different symptoms he's going through, and he pretty much, the only one he doesn't have is feeling suicidal. He actually wants to keep fighting, presumably because it's the only thing he knows. Like I said, it was just very emotional. It's the first time in a while that we've seen a story that's really showing the effects of war. We saw a lot of those in the first book. We've seen some of those in this book. A lot of the interludes in this book have been more to the effect of, this is what the galaxy is like, but this one really kind of gets down to the nitty gritty. I also liked he got a little rolly droid, like a BB-8 or a CB-23. This one's called QT-9, so I think it's kind of cool to see probably one of the first series of the rolly droids. So that was kind of a cool introduction. He gets this therapy droid. There's a cool Easter egg. He tells his doc that I don't recall ever owning a droid. Shout out to Obi-Wan's line about R2. And another thing that I thought was kind of amusing is when he doesn't want the droid, the doctor says that he could get a therapy Ewok. I guess the Ewok species wants to give back to the people that saved their world, and so they've been following people around, and that's just interesting concept to me, is that you would just have this Ewok following you around. Especially, I'm reading this novel now after having read Last Shot, which you can see behind me, by Daniel Jose Older, and that one had an Ewok hacker. So it's just the idea of seeing Ewoks in the galaxy is something kind of amusing to me. It's also very telling that Dade, at the end of the interlude, does not take his skin sock, the thing that would hide that he has a prosthetic leg, that he wants people who, he doesn't see the reason to hide it. So it was just kind of nice. Doesn't feel like the right word, but it was, I think, needed to kind of get away from the big story. We've spent so much time with what Nora's going through and so much time with the team on Kashyyyk to kind of get away and see what one other person's kind of going through out in the galaxy was interesting. On to chapter 31. We see Leia is having some bad dreams. These dreams were very interesting. They were scenes from the films, but being played out differently. The one that I found most interesting is Leia saw herself dying in childbirth to her children, course, she's pregnant with one child right now. So this dream is her seeing how her mother died, but seeing herself in it, and that was pretty trippy. I kind of wonder if she knew that that's what she was seeing. Certainly, as fans, we know that's what she's seeing. She awakes to her droid informing her that Condor Kyle has come to visit her. If you don't remember, Condor Kyle is the current significant other to Singer, so he's kind of getting pulled back into the story. Leia found out about him because he's, quote, a friend of Nora. She's asked Condor to track Han and see how things are going on Kashyyyk, basically. So at this point, Leia is aware that the Wookiees have been freed and that the planet is under bombardment, and she has to decide what she wants to do from there. One part of this exchange that I really liked was Leia knows that Han has to be involved, because if anyone could cause a whole planet to bomb itself, it would be Han. I'm paraphrasing the line there, but I thought that was funny. That so often, Leia especially, but different characters talk about the intense reactions people often have to Han Solo, and that it would be perfectly natural to have one of those reactions be, let's bomb the planet. As a morality mirror, as they kind of often are played up in these books, Sloane also can't sleep. She's being kept awake, this time by the peace talks. She knows that the peace talks are a fraud, and that Rax has sent her there because he's going to attack Chandrila. She does not know what the plan is to attack Chandrila, and she's really torn, because she knows that if this goes the way Rax promises, she's basically going to be the Emperor, and however she wants to call herself. But because it's Rax, it could also easily not go the way he says it's going to go. As far as she's aware, it could even be a test. It's also important to note that Sloane is also thinking about Kashyyyk. She knows that that's a planet that Rax has willingly given up. And it's interesting that Sloane doesn't like slavery. She specifically says that, you know, in her perfect empire, you wouldn't have a need for slavery because, of course, Imperial citizens would just want to serve the Empire. Sloane's morality is such an interesting thing, because it's one of those easy things to say, like, I want this really authoritarian government, but I don't like this thing that usually comes with authoritarian governments. Though it's hard to find, at least in Star Wars, and a case where there was an empire, or something like an empire, and there wasn't also slavery. At least in Star Wars, if not to an extent in real life, those things often go hand in hand. So it's kind of interesting for her to like this type of government, but not like part of it, and not necessarily see how they kind of go hand in hand, because inevitably, you're not going to have people that just want to serve the Empire for the sake of the idea of serving the Empire. And that's inevitably how something with this extreme of an ideology, that's the trap that it often falls into, is for it to work, you need everyone to be just as zealous about it, regardless of their point in privilege in the story. And while Sloane has definitely had to fight her way up, she's definitely had to fight against different prejudices within the Empire. I don't want to say that she's more privileged, or she's like the most privileged or most protected type of person, but she's still an admiral. You know, even if she's an admiral that has to watch her back, she's different than the guy working double shifts in a factory. So it's also kind of easy for her to say that, and I'm not sure she understands how easy it is for her to say that. One really fun thing in this book, so in my version, the mass market paperback, page 379, there's a bit that talks about Sloane falling asleep to a radio drama, and it's about this droid that's a detective, but the droid's actually an assassin. The droid's name is Adam. So that is a fun shout out to a friend of this channel. Chuck Wendig is really good friends with an author by the name of Adam Christopher. We've actually had the opportunity to interview Adam Christopher about his From a Certain Point of View short story, and then he came on to the Port Haven Streamcast and did a really wonderful hour-long interview with us, just chatting about writing and nerdery in general. He has a book series called the Ray Electromatic series, and it's about a robot detective who's also secretly a robot assassin, and of course his name is Adam. So this is Adam Christopher's one of his two cameos. The other one is going to be in Empire's End, and we'll see if we can spot it when we get there. I've read 2 of the 4. There's 4 books. Professor Django has read all 4 and loves all 4. I've read, like I said, the first 2, and I love the first 2. I haven't gotten to the 3rd one yet, but highly recommend these. But that was just something that was kind of fun for me. When I read the book the first time, I wasn't even familiar with Adam Christopher yet. Reading through, I was able to catch it. He also warned me that he has a cameo in these books. So that's just kind of a fun little aside. But the big point at the end of this chapter is Timon is once again interacting with Brenton. They are working on cool repair stuff, and Timon is disappointed because Brenton walks off again for one of his walks, and Timon decides to follow him this time. And it seems kind of odd. His dad's like chatting up a couple different random people, and Timon ultimately is like, oh, it's all in my head. And he goes to talk to his dad, and it turns out his dad was in some sort of secret meeting that he was not supposed to see, and his dad shoots him. And that's how the chapter ends. So surprise! Because I know where the series goes, I can't really remember what dots would be connected at this point, so I don't really want to talk about that too much for fear of spoiling this for anyone who's reading through as we go. So I will talk more about that Brenton twist when we actually get to the chapters that follow up with the Brenton twist, but yeah, this one definitely shocked me when I read the book for the first time. It was not where I expected the story to go, and it's going to lead to some really good stuff in the future. Chapter 32, we have Jazz. She's still on Kashyyyk with the rest of the crew. And, you know, she sees Kashyyyk as her, like, chance to do one good deed for the galaxy, you know, finally do something for its intrinsic value, not necessarily for the money. And she's found out that this is a lot harder than she thinks it is. So Jazz is actually feeling crushed by the weight of the responsibility of what they're doing. She was trying so hard to do this good thing, and now all these Wookiees are dying, the planet's being bombarded, they didn't actually succeed, and she's starting to fall into some despair. And she realizes that it's hard to be the hero because it seems like it's great to be the hero and save everybody when you actually save everybody, but sometimes you don't actually save everybody. And she's kind of learning the true challenge of having a heart. And the true challenge of having a heart isn't doing a job for no money, it's your choices matter and people are counting on you, and what exactly that means. This is the same woman who's been shrugging off being a part of a team for so long, and shrugging off, you know, being in a true committed romantic relationship and not just a fling. And now suddenly she's got a world on her shoulders, and she's having a hard time dealing with that. But Solo, of course, comes in, and Solo's a lot more smug about it, and he comes up with one of his cool kind of half-baked plans. We get to find out what that is later. But I really like seeing Solo and how he plays off of Jazz, how they seem so similar and they're so different. And one of the most endearing parts of Han is Han he wouldn't necessarily admit it, at least in terms of the Force, at least not until later in his life, but he definitely rides on faith. You know, Han rides on, I'm just going to go and it's going to work itself out. And it's a very endearing quality, especially to see in a character that at least pretends to be so cynical. And that's something I've always appreciated about him. And then finally, Chapter 33. Chapter 33, Leia is trying to find a way to get to Kashyyyk to help Han out. And she enlists the help of her friend Avan. So Avan was somebody I believe I mentioned in a previous video for this series, but she was mentioned in the 4th interlude of this book of Life Debt, with the Alderaan Flotilla interlude, where they get like pieces of the Death Star to like build their new space colony. Avan is somebody who worked with Princess Leia in the Princess Leia miniseries comic, which is phenomenal and I really, really recommend, where Leia and Avan go around the galaxy finding Alderaanian refugees to kind of bring the people back together. And the cool thing about Avan's character is she actually didn't like Leia at first. She kind of saw her as the ice-cold princess, who didn't really care about her people, and then throughout the course of the comic, they become the friends that you see in this passage. And so it was really cool to see her back and kind of see her as a relationship that even if Leia is not keeping up with, Leia talks about how she hasn't spoken to Avan in a while, but it's cool to see these people kind of come back into Leia's life, and it's always cool to see the books interacting with comics in this way. That's what I have for this week. I'm really excited, guys. If I plotted these pages out correctly, I think we have 3, maybe 4 weeks, and we'll be done with this book. I think it's only 3. We're really moving right along. I'm really excited to get to the end of this one, and I'm really excited to talk about Empire's End, which is my favorite of the 3 books. For next week, we're going to read the interlude on Ryloth, and then chapters 34, 35, and 36. So that's going to be 4 elements again. So an interlude, chapter 34, 35, 36. That's where we will pick up next time. Obviously, there's a lot of kind of hanging threads that I'm excited to get to. Let me know what you thought about these passages, what you think about the book so far in the comments. Please follow us on the various social medias. I love talking to you guys. I love connecting to you, or connecting with you about this book. I'm really excited to see where we go from here. And with that, I'll talk to you guys next week.